turn back to example 1. And this type of question is very typical. It's very scary when you first read it, but is very doable and an easy question to do. I give it a name. I call these questions double triangle questions. And again, because I give it that name, you're going to predict that we're going to have to draw 2 triangles. Okay? So what's going to happen in these questions is they're going to give us information about alpha, and they're going to give us information about beta. So we can draw a triangle for alpha, and we can draw a triangle for beta. So, for example, given angle alpha in standard position in quadrant 3. So the first thing we're going to do for our alpha triangle is we can draw an angle that is not in quadrant 3. Came so close. Try it again. There we go. We can draw an angle in quadrant 3. It's a long spring break. And when you draw the angle, where are you going to draw your triangle? Just a little reminder, we always draw our triangle back to the nearest x-axis so that we can label our reference angle. In this case, it'll be an alpha reference angle because this is our alpha triangle. So there's going to be enough information for you to figure out what quadrant the angle is in, and then they're going to give you some other information so you can label some sides. In this case, they tell us that cos of alpha is -3/5. Now, if cos of alpha is -3/5, that will tell me cos is adjacent over hypotenuse. I know this length would be 3, this length would be 5. You will see, if you watch other YouTube videos, you will see that sometimes people do this question and they add the negative with the 3 because you're going 3 to the left. For me personally, I like to think of this as an actual triangle, and this length would be 3. The fact that it's going to the left, I don't need to label it as a -3. We have to think of our CAS rule always to figure out which things are positive and negative. Once you've labeled that, you are able to do a squared plus b squared equals c squared. This is probably one you even recognize as the famous 3, 4, 5 triangle. And once you have this, you could figure out what sine of alpha, cos of alpha, tan of alpha is. We already know, we'll write it off to the side, we already know that cos of alpha is -3/5, but now we would be able to say that sine of alpha is -4/5. 4/5 from the triangle, and the negative because it's in quadrant 3, so according to our CAST rule, sine would have to be negative. And now they give us information about beta. So we can draw, same thing, figure out where beta is. It tells us beta is in quadrant 2. We can draw a triangle back to the nearest x-axis, label our beta reference angle, and we are told that sine of beta is 1/3, so that makes opposite over hypotenuse. And you can do a squared plus b squared equals c squared, and solve, we'll do that. Solve that this side is the square root of 8. So from this, we already knew that sine of beta was 1/3, but now we can do cos of beta. Cos is negative in quadrant 2. Adjacent over hypotenuse would be -√8/3. So they'll give us information to draw two triangles. It says determine the exact value of sine of alpha plus beta. And this is where we have to go to our formula sheet. Sine of alpha plus beta is equal to sine of alpha cos of beta plus cos of alpha sine of beta. And the next step is to use the information of the triangles to substitute in. And I have found that every year that I teach this, that there's a very, very common mistake that happens next. And it doesn't matter if I've taught it first or not, everybody who's going to make this mistake will make it the first time they try it on their own. Even if I show you the right way today, if I just taught this and showed you the right way of doing it, if I gave you a test in 2 days, 50% of you would make the mistake. And you will always make it the first time that you try it. So what I've found is at this point, I get you to try it for your first time on your own. Because I want you to find out, am I the person that makes the mistake, or am I the person that does it right? If I do it right now, I'll do it right on my quiz. If I do it wrong right now, unless I look at what I did, I will also do it wrong on my test. And I don't want that to happen. So I'm going to take a survey, find out if our class is perfectly split, 50-50. What you have to do is you have all the information from your triangles here. Your job is to substitute the information in as the next step. You just have to write down the next line, and I'll come around and do a survey. First of all, the correct way to do it, I will do here in black first, and then I'll show the incorrect way underneath in red, and then erase it, okay? The correct way is, you do not know what alpha is. Nowhere, anywhere have you figured out what alpha is. But from the alpha triangle, we did figure out what sine of alpha is. Even though we don't know alpha, we can take this whole thing of sine of alpha and replace it with 4/5. Same thing, we can take the whole thing of cos of beta and replace it with -8 root 8 over 3. The whole thing of cos of alpha and replace it with -3/5. And the whole thing of sine of beta and replace it with 1/3. The most common mistake is students keep the sine and they keep the cos like that. But you don't know alpha, you don't know beta. So it's very tempting because you're used to, when you do substitution, you're used to plugging in a number for a variable, right? Normally you plug in something just for the variable, so you're tempted to do what's in the red, okay? But you don't know alpha, you don't know beta. You know all of sine alpha is -4/5. So when we do the substitution, we replace all of the sine alpha with -4/5. So for those of you that did write the sine and the cos, very typical mistake, hopefully you think about that right now and see, oh, it makes sense that I don't know what alpha is, I don't know what beta, but I do know what all of sine alpha is. So that's why the sine disappears, because I replace all of this with this. And now to finish up this question, and why these questions are fairly straightforward, because it's fairly easy to use your cast rule to draw your triangles, easy to do a squared plus b squared, and then the substitution, now root -4 times -√8, that will be +4 root 8 over 15. Multiply these ones, plus minus 3 over 15. You have to write your answer as a single fraction in the end. We already have a common denominator, so your final answer will be 4 root 8 minus 3 all over 15. So circle questions 8 and 13. And I'm going to give you the last time now to start doing some of these homework questions.